Welcome to Southpod, the first and foremost podcast created to tell the true story of tech innovation in the American South. Southpod is hosted by John Yarian and Stanfield Gray and produced by Dig South Tech Media. Dig South Tech Media is the South's tech hub, the place where leading global brands connect with the most scalable startups. Visit us at digsouth.com and follow us on social media at Dig South. This episode of Southpod was recorded as a part of the Dig South 2020 Virtual Tech Summit. It featured keynote speaker Cassandra Worthy of We Are Change Enthusiasts. Now let's dig into Southpod with Cassandra Worthy.
Cassandra Worthy, you know as the founder and CEO of Change Enthusiasm Global, a well-respected global enablement firm. She is a former Fortune 100 innovation leader, a highly dynamic speaker, which you will recognize instantly, and presenter. She, just for fun, is also a chemical engineer, and above all else is the world's leading expert on change enthusiasm. She founded the global hashtag We Are Change Enthusiast movement, which has been viewed and shared millions of times. And if there was ever a moment in our time as a conference that we needed to speak to somebody that knows a thing or two about change, this is it. And so without further ado, I would like to bring Cassandra Worthy on camera with me here.
What up, Joe?
Hey, man, this is fantastic. I feel like we're in the same place. I know that's a weird thing to say.
It's cool. I like it. Although I gotta tell Stan, show him that pineapple. Like, I want to eat it.
Yeah.
It's like, don't just show it to me. Give me some pineapple, man.
I don't think that's the last time that pineapple has made it on screen this conference. I feel like we're going to see that pineapple again.
There's going to be much more of the pineapple, I'm sure.
So, Cassandra, let me get things started. So we know you today, as the founder and CEO, boundless energy, motivating people to embrace change. But that hasn't always been the case. You have a history. So can you take us back in time, kind of take us back to where this kind of all started?
How far you want to go back, Joel?
I mean, I don't know. I'm willing to go elementary school if you've got that in you.
Let's do it. That's actually a good place to start. Let's go to the fourth grade.
Okay.
Let's go to Cassandra in the fourth grade.
All right.
So yeah, when I was younger, I've always had an insatiable curiosity, right? And it's still with me today. I've always been curious about the mysteries of life. And so as a kid, I was that kid who asked the whys, the hows, the whats incessantly. Mm-hmm. And so I always tell people that science and math chose me because they armed me with the tools to explore these mysteries. So I've always gravitated towards them. And in the fourth grade, I was sitting in the living room with my parents and my family, and we were watching this award show. And I saw this dude walk up on the stage and get awarded for being the first neurosurgeon to successfully separate Siamese twins from the cranium, from the brain. And he's sharp. He was African-American, well-dressed, well-spoken. It was Dr. Ben Carson.
Uh-huh.
So I saw him. I was like, dude, he's getting applauded for this really cool scientific medical feat. And then I saw how much neurosurgeons make. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I want to do. So from the fourth grade all the way to sophomore year of college at Georgia Tech, I wanted to be a pediatric neurosurgeon. So if anyone asks, what do you want to be when you grow up? Pediatric neurosurgeon.
That is so specific. Yeah, that is such a specific job.
It was. I love it. He inspired me, It's somebody who looked like me. Like I said, he was well dressed. He was making money. He was doing scientific stuff.
Yeah.
And so it was cool. But then, I talk about that insatiable curiosity. So sophomore year at school, I turned that curiosity within, and I had to do a little check-in with that fourth grader and ask her why. Why do you really want to be a neurosurgeon? And the reasons that she gave didn't really hold water for me as a sophomore in college. And so I was like, you know what? I looked at the engineering degrees. At the top of the list, chemical engineering, highest paid.
Yeah.
And I also saw that all of my credits, most of my credits, because I was biology pre-med, would transfer into Chem E. So I was like, you know what? I could switch this up. I can go to chemical engineering. I could still keep doing science and math that I love. I could still pursue medicine if I wanted after graduating, or I could get a really well-paying job after I graduate. So that's what I did. I never looked back. And I ended up working in the consumer products segment for like 15 years.
Wow.
Most of which at Procter & Gamble. Yeah.
Is there a chance that I have drank or put something on my skin or in my hair that you worked on
Without
during
a doubt.
that? Yeah.
Most likely. So I worked in hair care and I worked in blades and razors. So if you've used a Gillette razor, for those of you watching, if you use a Venus razor, if you use any Pantene in your adolescence, and then I also worked in a Duracell business for about 9 years. So if you've used a Duracell battery, you've used some of my innovation, some of my work.
So if I used one of those fancy Gillette battery-powered razors, I used like everything that you worked on, the battery, the razor.
So I did everything with exception to the blade.
So
I'm a chemical engineer, so I did all of the lubristrips, the lube rings, all the lubricity that you get off the razor. I did the design and the process development for that.
Wow. And 15 years of that, but there comes a moment along the way at P&G where I understand there was a fairly sizable acquisition. What was so significant about that?
Yeah, what was significant is, I went through 2 acquisitions. So one was when P&G acquired Gillette, and then the other was when Berkshire Hathaway acquired Duracell. And the significance was they were some of the toughest, most challenging times in my career. And I had a lot of frustration. I had a lot of anger. I had a lot of anxiety going through that. There were times when I would walk into the office and truly just want to quit and just want to leave. Days and days on end, that would happen. And through going through that struggle, I cultivated this thing that I coined change enthusiasm, which is now at the core of my business. And that is not running away from those negative emotions that major change brings, like fear, anxiety, and anger, rather embracing them and recognizing that they're signals. They're signaling you into this moment of opportunity to evolve, to grow, and creating that mindset and practicing it on a consistent basis, going through those acquisitions, I catapulted my career and I ended up learning and growing and making new connections. And it exploded my career in ways that I had never imagined. Simply by recognizing when I get those feels, those signal emotions, this is opportunity. I'm about to grow. Got to lean into this and grow and make choices.
I want to sit there with you for just a second, because I feel like that is something, if anyone on this call, anybody here in attendance, we have all felt that. We have all felt that desire to quit. We have all felt that moment. I mean, sometimes it's layered with, not only do I hate this and I want to quit, but I am starting to fear this is the wrong thing for me to be doing anyway. And I've spent a lot of time investing my career in it. And that can we're getting the signals, but we're misinterpreting those signals to not be a springboard, but instead be, kind of a damper. So if you wouldn't mind, can you just talk about how you were able to change your ability to receive those signals and make them positive rather than negative for folks listening at home? Because I feel like this is a real moment of bonding for all of us.
Right. So I'll give you a quick story about really the first major big challenge, which was the Gillette acquisition. And like I said, I was just wanting to quit every single day. Well, I ended up having a join up or a meeting with one of my mentors. And I was basically just venting to her, saying how I didn't like my line management and things were just a struggle. And she was like, Cassandra, I'm going to give you some advice. You can either get bitter or you can get better.
I like it. I like it.
Your choice. And of course, when she first said that, my signal emotions just blasted and I was pissed.
Yeah.
I'm like, what are you talking about?
You got bitter.
It's not my choice. I got bitter immediately. I'm like, you're the director. You have the influence. I don't. It's not my choice. But I allowed those words, bitter or better. And I don't know if it was the alliteration, but they just stayed with me for the next several days.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I do have control and power over how I experience my work, over how I experience my day. And so I started to choose things that would bring me little bits of light in the day, little bits of joy. And it
Yeah.
impacted the way that I integrated and kind of communicated with my colleagues. I ended up writing these. We had this intercompany system of articles, and I wrote a series of them that I called my diaries. And for one of them, I actually interviewed a lot of my working team colleagues that I had been annoyed with, and
Yeah.
just wanting to learn, like, what do you love best about your work, and how can your work help, grow other areas of the parent company? And I ended up discovering kind of these big differences in the cultural norms across the two different companies. And it really helped to ease the tension. It helped to ease how I was behaving, how we
Yeah.
had conversations in the hallways, and the whole energy around me just changed. And
Yeah.
it was through conscious choice, conscious thought,
Yeah.
and
I like
wanting
it.
to choose my better. It was amazing. And that's when I
That,
started to see the fruit of the mind, the fruit of that mindset.
yeah. I love that. I'd love to kind of move from there into, I was reflecting on this. I was realizing you, in a way, were your first client. You didn't know it at the time, but
Totally. Totally.
you were the first one. You worked it out yourself. How did you make the transition from these are things that I didn't set out. You didn't wake up one day and say, I'm gonna create a reusable framework. I don't know what it's gonna be yet, but this is gonna be a playbook. I'm gonna create it. You just got
Yeah.
yourself through it. So tell me
Yeah.
about the transition for where you realize this isn't magic. This isn't
Yeah.
something that you only yourself are capable of. How did you
Yeah.
kind of codify, if you will, or create this playbook that you could then train other people to do? What was that transition like?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, for me, it always starts with my journey within. And I knew, even when I started working in corporate, that leading innovation, leading organizations in corporate was not how my gifts, talents, and abilities was going to be
Yeah.
best shared with people. And so it was about 5 years ago, is actually after I stopped drinking and had full clarity, that I started to really dig into that curiosity of, what does that look like? What could it look like sharing my gifts in a bigger way? And at first, I just started blogging. So I started a blog post. I called myself a
Nice.
happiness writer. And I just started writing blogs. And I ended up going to a conference that was put on by Hay House Publishing. They're the biggest self-help publishing company in the world. And during that conference, one of the leaders was Cheryl Richardson. She's a New York Times bestselling author. She's been on Oprah. But she pulled me out kind of in front of the whole audience and had me do a little talk in front of folks, just talking about what I'm passionate about, why I want to write. And she's like,
Yeah.
you need to be in front of people. You need to share this energy
Man.
with the world. You need to be
Yeah.
on stages in front of people.
Yeah.
And I never even considered getting on a stage, sharing myself, being me, and getting paid to do it was an option.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
I never thought that was a thing.
it's hilarious to hear you say that now, because the idea of the world continuing on with you not having stepped into that role would just be so
Yeah.
heartbreaking. Yeah. So
Yeah,
that
thank you.
I'm glad.
Thank
Yeah.
you for saying that. But
Yeah.
yeah, she brought that to my attention. And then by going through that conference, I ended up having the opportunity to work with her and Reed Tracy, who's the president and CEO of that company. And they mentored me for 6 months and kind of helped me cultivate my business and my speaking platform. And they coached me into, you've got to find a way to merge your gifts, talents, and passions with your prior experience. And they
Yeah.
asked questions like, what's been kind of the toughest thing you've gone through, your biggest challenge? And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, it have to be those acquisitions. And so the more that I thought about it, I was like, I had to create a framework to get myself through that. And it was huge for me. And I'm like, well, I could probably create something like that can be reapplicable and that can help others. Because, I was still working full time at that point, and I still had colleagues struggling through change and so stressed out and just frustrated and
Yeah.
hating coming into the office,
Yeah.
hating it. And I could see it, like, you just change your mindset. You're in a massive moment of opportunity, and it's
Yeah.
up to you. You have the power. And so it's through working with them, knowing that I needed to bring some solution to help my colleagues at the time, and then now my client base, is how
Yeah.
it all kind of came together.
So I love it. I want to maybe just talk, if you could talk us through, I don't, I don't want to sound like the expert here, but basically we all know that change in a corporate environment is pretty easy. You sit down in a room, you write a thorough bullet pointed email, and then you schedule a follow-up in a conference room with a PowerPoint, and then the change is done. And so I've got the formula already. So kind of what am I missing? What are you experiencing most? Because I've been through change before, and that's pretty much what it looks like in an organizational environment. What is the ingredient that people overlook in your experience? What is it that you feel like you're opening people's eyes to and coaching them on most?
So I think more and more people are recognizing the importance of people when going through change, because it's the people that are doing the change and making the change a reality. And so this idea of empowering people and understanding how culture clash and all that can, stop change in its tracks. I think people are getting on to that notion and understanding that. But myself and my firm take it a level deeper, and it's into emotion and understanding that, people will always admit, okay, we're about to go through this big transformation. It's going to be tough. It's going to be challenging, but here's the vision. Here are your roles and responsibilities. It's going to be challenging, but go off and do it. But they don't give them first the acknowledgement of the emotions that they're going through, and then a productive platform, a conduit to let that emotional energy flow. Peter McWilliams has said that emotion is energy in motion. And that energy can either fuel your change vision or it can stall it. It can stop it in its tracks. And you have to empower your people to recognize and embrace whatever negative emotion they might be feeling, and then give them a means to transform that energy into the energy that can fuel change. And too often leaders they ignore the emotion, right? They don't want to talk about it. This is business. You don't talk about emotion in business.
No.
But if you ignore it, what are employees left to do? Just like me, you vent and you go into the mental downward spiral. This sucks. This is the worst. This is hard. This is awful. It's got to be better in this other company. Gotta be. I'm getting out of here.
No, it's funny, like even talking with you about it, I feel like cursing. Like when I'm about to chime in, all that comes to mind are curse words, because that's what I feel viscerally about that experience.
You have to acknowledge that and let people do that emoting, but obviously do it in a very productive way. And in my workshops and sessions, it's allowing people to share if they've gotten any of those signal emotions and then what's driving them. But as we're sitting together and they're emoting, it's a recognition that we're in a big moment of opportunity. With all of these emotions you all are feeling, the signals are going off everywhere. We're about to evolve. We're about to grow. This business is about to be better. You're about to be a better leader. So it's got to be a very productive way, but you got to have a conduit for that energy to flow.
That is just such a great. I want to use that as a transition, because I feel like the obvious that 2020. If I could describe 2020 in one word, because shit show is two words. That would be one word. That's two. If I had to compress it to one word, it would be change. And that's why I'm so excited to be talking to you right now, because I feel like the first half of the year, everybody felt this change was being put upon them, and the memes were all about, can we just fast forward to 2021? I miss 2019. This is the worst year. But I think there's a sense of opportunity that could be kind of fanned, that we're getting all the signals that things need to change. And I'd like to just start about how you in your own business have, speaking specifically of the pandemic and how that's affected, how that has how you have applied the change enthusiasm growth mentality to 2020 personally. And then after that, I'd like to chat a little bit beyond that and things that our audience could take away in their own experience. So let's start with, how have you embraced this as an opportunity for change within your model personally?
Sure. Let me just quickly go back to shit show.
Oh, okay, cool.
You're right.
Cool. Yeah.
Right.
Hey, I'm always ready to go back to shit show.
let me just talk about shit show in a good
Yeah.
way, right? So I was chatting with one of my colleagues, Elizabeth Gore. She's the CEO of Hello Alice. It's this multi-million-dollar platform for entrepreneurs, notably women and minorities. And she was saying how, 2020 has been a shit show. But she also grew up on a farm. And I was like, farmers, you use shit for planting, and wonderful things grow from that. She was like, that's right. All farmers have to have good shit. So there's a lot of goodness. There's a lot of goodness to come from this shit.
I like it. Let's not forget fertilizer is shit.
There you go. That's right. It's feeding us. It's fueling us. So with that point, let me talk about the shit I've been going through and what's grown from it. So obviously with the pandemic, I've had to shift the majority of my offerings into the virtual space.
Yeah.
And prior to it happening, I was supposed to be in 15 or 16 different states, a couple different countries. And then I just saw my calendar get annihilated. Fortunately, the majority of them were rescheduled, but many were canceled. And honestly, there are about 2 weeks where I sat on my couch and all I could do was just check email and see all of the rescheduled notice and cancellations. All of the booking inquiries had stopped. And I was getting the signaling motions stronger than I've probably gotten them in years. And it was tough. And I allowed them to exist for 2 weeks on that couch, binging Netflix.
Yeah.
And I was anxious, kind of fearful. I almost started to regret making the choice to sunset my corporate career and a steady paycheck. But then I'm like, I'm a change enthusiast. Like, I talk about this with my clients. I need to pull it together. And I'm like, I am getting the strongest signal emotions. So this must mean I'm about to grow exponentially.
I love it.
And that's kind of what I've done. So I've learned more about technology and cameras and lighting and angles and setup and home theater and green screens and than I ever thought I would. And the bookings have started to pick up almost to the point where I was pre-COVID. And because I'm in a virtual space, I'm actually reaching more people. I'm reaching more people with a messaging through the virtual landscape. And I've had the great honor of doing a TEDx talk. I just got invited to do another one in the fall. I actually got a LinkedIn learning course because of, I was one of the few instructors they wanted to film a course at my home because I had become somewhat tech savvy. So the opportunity just started hurling their way once I recognized who I am and that I was getting those signal emotions. And I'm so very grateful for the opportunities that this has presented. And the fact that I truly feel I'm rising to the call because on a global scale, signals are blasting on a global scale.
Yeah, it's so true.
I think this message is needed now more than ever. Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you a little bit about kind of speaking to that global scale and the way in which there's no one in attendance that isn't in one way or another dealing with the change that the coronavirus has brought on the workplace in particular. And before I ask it, I just want to remind folks, feel free to type in some questions in the chat bar on the side there. There's a Q&A field where you can put questions in. You can also just type them in the chat. And to the extent that we have time at the end, I'll incorporate those. So without dwelling on that too much, let me just ask you, Cassandra, and it looks like we may have lost the connection. So I just want to chat briefly here with the audience. Take a moment. I can see, if you're curious about what the world looks like to me, I see the chat right over here. So I'm able to, if in the flow, I can respond to those.
That's hilarious.
Feel free to use that chat. What's hilarious there, Cassandra?
What's up? My connectivity just goes to shit.
I feel like honestly we kind of planned that just to demonstrate the way in which we're all on a daily basis having to deal with these new disruptions. And so speaking of a question for the audience, I feel like I have to assume that some people have asked to have you speak to their organization or help them through changes that involve how are we as an organization dealing with, say, moving to an all remote workplace. And in my mind, that's simply I tell you guys, this is what we're going to do. You do it, and we're going to get through it. And how you feel about it is irrelevant. So when people are confronting specifically kind of the way in which a workspace is changing, what are some of the ways that you find this growth mentality and opportunity can be employed for folks that are dealing with a newly virtual staff? Does that question make sense? You know what I'm poking at there?
Of course. Yeah, of course. So the first thing that I always say is that whenever you're making a big transition or change like this, leadership must recognize that everyone's going to wear the change differently.
Yeah.
Right. So some people are going to be very, very readily, to adopt and be very excited about working remotely. There are other people that are going to be just really anxious about it and overwhelmed, not really having had the experience of setting things up, using a webcam and all that kind of stuff. So just know that there's going to be a lot of different levels of comfort, a lot of different emotions going through those big changes. And I would say just become in tune with that. And if you have direct reports, how each one of them is handling that transition. And also, spend that one-on-one time, making sure that their level of comfort is growing and that you're there with them in that journey. Recognizing all the way, wherever you're at, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah. And this is about taking steps towards, whatever the vision is. But just recognize that everyone's going to go through this in a little bit different way.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, I'll always mention the benefit, right? The benefit of being in a virtual space and what it affords you versus having to come into the office.
Yeah, because it's not without its benefits. I think it's funny, right? If you imagine this alternate universe where we all worked remotely, and then there was some global issue that forced us to all start working in the same buildings with one another, we would experience the same, I don't like this. This is not what work is. This isn't what I signed up for. Now I have to get in my car every morning and drive a half an hour to some other place that's just like my office at home. And so if you flip it on its head, we're going to complain about something. And so either way, I have a quick question from the audience. I'm gonna just take a breath. We've been chatting hard at it.
Sure.
And I want to rewind, just switch gears for a second. It's an interesting question. Going back to that intellectual curiosity that you described having as a child, how would you, I feel like, and I think many here in attendance feel like that is critically important, that everybody has that sense of intellectual curiosity. How do you recommend folks go about cultivating that in their community or in their organization? Is that a fair question? You're feeling that one?
Yeah. Go about cultivating that. So meaning cultivating that in other people.
Yeah, exactly.
So not necessarily growing your own curiosity, in other people. Oh gosh. So I worked for an organization, and specifically a leader who was kind of like a rebel. And I really enjoyed him because I feel myself to be a rebel. And he would actually grant an hour in every day where you need to have a blank calendar. And he wanted you to devote that hour to whatever you wanted to create, a new connection you wanted to make, something that you wanted to go and learn. If you wanted to go and shadow, like maybe somebody in marketing, he wanted you to spend that hour doing just that. And so it was his intentionality behind giving you the time and space to satisfy that curiosity and to grow and have those synapses going around creativity. So as a leader, I think it's just important that we're very intentional about making sure the workforce knows the value that we place on pursuing curiosities and learning and growing, and then making sure we're granting the time and space for employees to do that. So it all comes down to intentionality.
Do you find when you've done a workshop that people say, can I come work for you? I like how you approach things better. Are you hiring? Is that the number one question you get at the end of the talk?
I do. I get, can I come work for you? I get, will you come work for me?
Yeah.
I get that a lot, to which I'm so grateful for. And I smile and say, no, thank you.
I'd like to kind of pop back to another question that kind of comes to mind is we've talked a lot about, or at least I mentally have kind of projected this change conversation on the staff, if you will, the thinking through what they're feeling. But I putting myself in the shoes of the leader who has been asked, I mean, let's say I don't even want this acquisition to happen, or I don't want my staff to work remotely. And let's say I'm just not a naturally empathetic person, that this concept of thinking about people's emotions is not something that comes naturally to me. How could I, if I'm not naturally gifted in that direction, cultivate the empathy and the interest in people's emotions? Are there kind of red flags like, oh, if you feel yourself thinking this, you should reorient and think this instead? Does that make sense? Like from a leader's perspective, how would they become a change enthusiast for their team?
Yeah. So I'm going to hook on empathy, right? Yeah. And when I think about empathy, and Brene Brown is, who I find to be my guru of empathy.
Yep.
And, he says empathy is creating a feeling or, a notion in another that they are not alone. That they're not alone. Whatever they're going through, whatever they're feeling, they're not alone. And so I think the very first step as a leader, if you're not overly familiar with being empathetic, it starts with listening. Simply listening. Listening, holding space for employees to share how they're feeling. You ask one question: how are you dealing and managing with the change? And listen.
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily have to offer anything back, but the fact that you are sitting there and listening is the very first step. Now, to actually show the empathy, when you hear them talking about something they're struggling with, try to find that place where you yourself struggled, where you yourself had something that you were facing that you didn't know how you were going to get through it. And see if you can relate back to that feeling that you had, and then be able to talk about, I felt something similar, and here's what I went through, here's how I was feeling, here's what I did. That's all it is. It's just trying to find a matching energy and allowing time and space for people to know they're not alone. Yeah.
Man, that I like how simple the solution is. That it feels like the response is like, well, here are these 7 things that you need to do precisely in this order. And in reality, it's simply ask, and that's it. Stop and listen. Just create the space. I love it. If I want to, here's another question that we've got here that I think is a really interesting one, and pushes us in a slightly different direction, but I want to rewind to where you were at Procter & Gamble, and there's a fine line between reading those emotional signals and allowing them to be an opportunity. And that signal may not always be telling you as an individual to stay at that organization. The opportunity, like in your case, you may be getting, when you get in touch with that, it's telling you need to make a dramatic change for yourself. Do you mind if I ask, like, how do you advise people to navigate that feeling? Because I can imagine their supervisor wants them to embrace a change that means you stay and do this. But in reality, as an individual, what you're experiencing might say, no, this is a new opportunity for you to go in a different direction.
Yes. So it's all about always staying in tune. So the three steps of change enthusiasm, which I didn't break down.
Oh yeah,
the first is recognizing the signal emotions. That's step 1. Recognizing, allowing them to exist, and trusting that they're there to serve you. The second step is stepping into the opportunity. When you're in the opportunity, this is where you're laying out options of reaching a better feeling. So what can I do in this situation? I'm in a job. It's giving me all these signal emotions. I don't really like it. Here's some of the elements that I don't like about it. Here's what's driving some of these emotions. Here's some things that I can do to better it while still staying in this role. How can I shift my work plan so that I'm doing 80% of the stuff that actually gets me jazzed versus all this other crap that I hate?
Yeah.
So what are my options to do that? In addition to those options, you could also start looking outside of that role, looking outside of that company. And then the third step is to make that conscious, productive choice that's going to bring you to a better feeling. And I'm not talking about moving all the way from anger and rage to bliss, because no one's going to make that step in one choice. But it's making these choices, the small choices, that will slowly bring you through that spectrum of emotion closer to a better feeling. Now, as you're working through options while still in that role, and you continue getting that signal emotion, even though you're making conscious choices and you're working against those options aren't working because you're still getting the signal emotions. So maybe you need to explore the ones, right? And I've certainly been in that situation where, I was in a role, I saw some opportunities, saw some options where I could shift up the work plan. But even after changing the work plan, I still got on a daily basis, I was like, you know what? I think there's a different role in a different organization that's going to better serve me and better leverage my skill set. And that's the choice that I'm going to make.
I like what you're saying there about the fact that it doesn't stop. You don't do the 3 steps and then that's something that happened in the past, and now you're on step 3. You can forget step 1. That's neat. You have a change, a growth cycle. I like it. Can you I was absorbing all of those. Let's just break down the 3 steps again so we can process. So step 1.
The signal.
The signal.
It's recognizing the negative emotions of change. And I distilled them down at a 5 from all the work that I've done. Fear, anxiety, frustration, anger, and grief. You're getting any of those 5? Embrace them. They exist for a reason. They're there to serve you. That's step 1. Step 2 is the opportunity. Step into the opportunity, trusting that you're ready to grow and evolve. And then list out options to explore to reach a better feeling. This is when you can engage mentors, when you can talk to loved ones, when you can share, hey, I've been feeling anxious about this. I don't really know what this is all about. Here's what I'm thinking of exploring. What do you think? You know what brings me joy. Well, what do you think? And then the third is the choice. It's making a conscious, productive choice from those options to get you to that better feeling. The signal, the opportunity, and the choice.
And then repeat. You're constantly getting those emotional signals.
Constantly. I've been doing this for well over a decade now. And like I said, for 2 weeks, I got the signal emotions, right? I'm sitting, laying on the couch. So this is an infinite evolution, right? You all heard the only thing that's constant is change, right? So you're going to have an infinite amount of change, disruption. Who could have guessed we'd be in a pandemic in 2020, right? And so the emotional level is infinite, but trust, they are there to serve you. They exist to serve your betterment and your evolution. And so I welcome them, even though I might have to, numb out a little bit on the couch.
Exactly.
But it's up to you. Do it at your own pace.
Next time I'm lying on the couch, and Allison, my wife, comes in, I'm going to say, I'm not wasting time. I'm listening to signals. This is a productive moment for me.
Man. Give me a break. I'm going to get going, but
I'm calibrating my receptors. Don't bother me. Oh my gosh. Well, Cassandra, I swear I could talk to you all day. This is such a treat. But we're
fun. It's awesome too. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been absolutely wonderful. And you hear this, I'm sure, plenty of times, but I can't wait to see you in person when this is all over. We'll have a Topo Chico together.
Yes, we must.